It's really great to be here in this new form of Sangha, and to connect with our beautiful Your Yoga Flow community. And I wanted to go over cueing with you today, and I know it's a short amount of time, so I made some notes to kind of keep on track. And then hopefully there'll be some time at the end for questions if you have any questions. So first of all, we can only teach what we know, right? We, as teachers of anything, we can only teach what we really know and authentically embody. So it's only natural when we're learning to be teachers that our cues will they'll probably start off fairly directive and straightforward, and evolve as we evolve as teachers. So I think it's really important as teachers to always maintain a beginner's mind, to stay curious and open and continue learning and evolving as we evolve, as the world evolves. So if you're just starting out, just practice. You know, things will change with your cueing as you learn more. When I started teaching, so I did my first teacher training, I finished in 2000, so that was a while ago. And the cueing back then was very influenced by Iyengar style of teaching. Iyengar had a large influence on yoga in the West, and especially around the time of the 90s, when Yoga Journal was a really big and popular magazine, and yoga was really taking off in the West. So his form of cueing, which was very specifically directive and anatomical, was more popular then. So for example, like in Warrior 1, 2, the placement of the feet was very specific, and the placement of the arms and the straight elbows and the extended fingers. That type of cueing, of course, is effective in some ways. It helps us guide our students into where we're going, but over time, the yoga bodies have experienced pain and chronic injuries, SI injuries, in the sacrum, hip injuries, chronic pain, and the understanding of the body has changed a lot. Like Paul Grilly, the yin yoga teacher, really exposed the difference in bones and joints we all have. So the idea to direct somebody so specifically in a shape doesn't really serve us anymore. It's not the contemporary Western understanding of the body. And the understanding of the body has changed so much in the last 20 years with the fascia lines, with the understanding of our brains, how they work, the neural pathways, with the understanding of trauma, and how trauma affects the nervous system. So there's just so much more new contemporary understanding of yoga that just to stick with directive anatomical cues, in my mind, doesn't really serve our students. And we want our classes to be accessible to who's out there on our mat. So we have to consider the different types of learners that we might have out on the mat. So the visual learner, the kinesthetic learner, the auditory learners, and start to develop cues that will work for all those styles of learning. So one thing that I used to do when I was first learning to teach was I would just practice, like I would pick a pose, say it was downward dog, and I would practice teaching it to those different types of learners that I'd have in my head. So like if I was in my car or if I was doing dishes, my family thought it was crazy, but I would just keep playing with, okay, well, how would I teach downward dog to a blind student? Or how would I teach downward dog to deaf student? Or how could I teach downward dog to my 75-year-old mother? Or how could I teach downward dog to my 7-year-old son? So to play with the understanding of the shape in different language to accommodate different students. So you can use play with visual imagery, poetic imagery, metaphors, and playing with cueing day-to-day activities. Like I think Juan mentioned that in one of the comments, like how to put on a sweater, or cueing how to make a perfect cup of tea, so that you just start to develop the ability in your brain, in your mind, to cue day-to-day activities, so that it can flow into your teaching of yoga. I think it's really important to develop your own unique voice in cueing. So for example, a friend of mine just finished a teacher training, and she's a real nature lover. So she uses a lot of reference to nature in her cues, and one of them that I love when she's cueing downward dog hands is she uses the example of limpets, which I didn't even know what a limpet was, but it's this very cool natural form of the hand placement in downward dog, these little beautiful limpets. And I in particular really love cooking, and I love cooking with super thick olive oil, like really great Italian olive oil. So often when I'm cueing joint warm-up, I reference, like, can you imagine you've got some nice thick goopy beautiful expensive olive oil that you're circling into your joints, and you're nourishing, you're lubricating your joints. So finding language that connects to you and your passions, and bringing that into your cueing, I think adds a really nice layer to your teaching. The directional and anatomical cues, as I said before, are helpful, and we need them in our classes. But if we're just using primarily directional and anatomical cues, I think the classes start to sound like an exercise class, not a yoga class. And we all understand that yoga means union. And so in a yoga class, we have an opportunity to help guide our students, or awaken our students to that union of self, that connection to true self. So that we can add invitational cues, or another way maybe you can say is experiential cues, in with the directional cues, to add that other layer to your teaching and to help your students find their own unique experience of the class. So that it's not finding cues to obtain like that perfect crow pose, like I nailed that crow pose. It's more about cueing to, okay, so how does that crow pose feel for you in your body? What's your experience of your breath in crow pose? And invitational language can allow much more space for students to experiment in their own body and to build sensations of awareness on their own terms. So it's different than telling someone this is what you do and this is what you feel. It's that quality of spaciousness for a more personal connection to self, which we call embodiment. So when we really embody the shape, the movement, the practice, for ourselves in our own unique way, it's empowering. We're like, oh, this is my experience. This is not just me following the direction or orders from the teacher. So invitational cues are cues such as, I invite you to, if it's comfortable for you, feel free to, and a reminder to honor your body. So more that spaciousness in cueing as opposed to put your right foot forward, your left foot 45 degrees in. There's a section in the manual about crutch phrases, which, I mean, I have that habit too, I catch myself. But try not to develop using, I think a couple that stand out for me are the we're going to, that body part. So for example, we're going to bring we're going to bring that left foot forward. We're going to step that left foot back. That if you take out those crutch phrases and just step forward with your right foot, step back with your left foot, it can, again, allow more sort of space and maybe seamlessness to your classes. That's my personal take on that. Another thing I encourage you to avoid in your cueing is blanket statements. So something like, recline butterfly is a relaxing pose and will calm your mind. So maybe for some bodies, recline butterfly is a relaxing pose and will calm your mind. For other bodies, it might be, an experience of stress and anxiety to have to be in a restorative pose. Or to say something like, feel the deep stretch in your left hip. So if we're telling, again, our students how to feel, for me personally, it takes away that self-empowerment, and maybe I don't feel that stretch in my left hip that the teacher's telling me I am, and then it's like, well, why aren't I feeling that stretch? Am I doing it wrong? Is there something wrong with my body? And that the words that we speak might land much differently than our intention. So I try to say things instead of recline butterfly is a relaxing pose and will calm your mind. Something like recline butterfly for some bodies is super comfortable, or it can be calming to the mind. So using more language and cues like can or perhaps instead of just a definitive, this is what it is. The words that we speak and the way we say them can set the tone for our class. So using the voice in a way to support your cues. I think there's some really great examples on the Your Yoga Flow platform, especially the Yin yoga teachers. They're super, I think, very talented with the way that they use their voice to create this very supported, held container for exploration. So I encourage you to watch those videos and to learn from those teachers in different ways to use your voice. Like the one that I can think of is if you want them to slow down the breath, you can slow down the breath. Just playing with your voice to support your cues. So a question that has come up for me when I was putting together my notes is how do you do it? How do you blend directional anatomical cues with invitational self-exploratory cues? So I wrote a little script for Warrior 1. From the top of your mat, Step your right foot back and place your feet with enough distance apart for you to feel comfortable in your body, with your hips and shoulders facing forward. Experiment with the placement of your feet so that you feel grounded and stable without feeling any strain. Notice how that angle and direction of the back foot is connected to the angle and direction of the same hip. Raise your arms up overhead. Sorry, my voice is cracking. Raise your arms up overhead. Find space between the collarbones and a feeling of ease in your shoulders and neck. How does it feel if you soften your fingers and hands a little? Can you imagine that you are gently nesting oranges in your armpits? Allow the crown of the head to rise upwards towards the sky as you nestle the front ribs into the back ribs. Can you feel your breath in the front, back, and sides of your torso? Or perhaps you could say, how does the breath feel for you in the front, back, and sides of your torso? So that that's sort of one way that you can play with directing your students, but then also allowing them some time to explore and be curious. Sorry, my throat is bugging me. Okay. Two-sided postures. So we have the opportunity when we're doing a right and left side postures to mix up the cues. So say Warrior One again. Perhaps on the first side of Warrior One, you set up more of the anatomy and the direction. And then when you go into the second side of Warrior One, you can bring in some of those invitational cues or experiential cues. There's nothing wrong with repeating the same cues on both sides. Like repetition can be a really good teaching tool. But if we just keep doing that throughout the whole class, I think personally it can start to sound a bit redundant and, again, more like an exercise class than a yogic experience. Cueing breath. So we need, of course, to teach our students some basic understandings of movement to breath. But for me personally, I try to stay away from cueing each breath, each movement to each breath, so that students instead have an opportunity to figure out their own breathing. That it's not move your foot here, breathe in, move your foot back, breathe out, move your arm here, breathe in, move your arm here, breathe out. Sometimes what I do is I'll lead my students through a couple rounds of sun salutations and just with really slow cueing with the breath, so that they start to learn how they can use the breath to support the movement. And then I just let them have some time to do 2 or 3 more sun salutations to their own breath rhythm. So that they have that space again, that space to understand the breath on their own terms, that it's not me, the teacher, directing them how to breathe or expecting them to keep up to the pace of my breathing. So another little script that I wrote that I often use when I'm teaching for breath. Bring your attention to your breath. Can you sense the movement of your breath in your torso? You might notice a sensation of the belly expanding as you breathe in and gently hollowing as you breathe out. You might notice a similar movement in the chest as you breathe in and the lungs expand, and as you breathe out when the lungs empty. Follow the rhythm of your breath in. Follow the flow of your breath out. Honor what you notice in your body. The understanding of breath in yoga is that when we take a breath in, we are allowing fresh oxygen and life force energy, called prana, into the body. And when we breathe out, we are releasing stale energy and carbon dioxide, a waste product that needs to be removed. The ancient yogis believed that if we slow down the rhythm of our breath, we can slow down all of the systems of the body, including the mind and the nervous system. So that there's space for them, your students, to experience the breath for themselves, and then you can pepper in some cues of the teachings of yoga. That's the overview of the cueing that I wanted to share with you. I took 3 examples from contemporary sources. I thought it would just be fun for you to hear 3 different versions of setting up cat-cow. And the first one, so I'm going to read you these 3 cue scripts. The first one's from Yoga Journal, that magazine that I was telling you about, that is still, I think it's still popular, and still follows the more Iyengar directive anatomical cueing. Start on your hands and knees in a tabletop position. Make sure your knees are set directly below your hips and your wrists. Elbows and shoulders are in line and perpendicular to the floor. Center your head in a neutral position, eyes looking at the floor. As you inhale, lift your sitting bones and chest toward the ceiling, allowing your belly to sink toward the floor. Lift your head to look straight forward. Exhale, pull your belly in, lift your side waist, round your spine, and release your head toward the floor. Actively press the floor away and feel the stretch in the back body. Repeat 10 to 20 times. The second one is from, she's a bit of a YouTube phenomenon called Yoga with Adriene. I think she has a really wide appeal in the way that she uses her voice. She plays a lot with her voice, and her sort of relatable personality. So, Yoga with Adriene. Today we're going to learn cat-cow, one of my favorite things in the entire universe. Cat-cow is great for a happy spine, massages the internal organs, stretches the belly, and can also reduce stress, which is something we all need to do, right? So hop on the mat and let's learn cat-cow. We're going to begin on all fours. We can pad the knees with a blanket, or we can double up the mat and it becomes a nice padding for the knees. Arriving on all fours right away, I want to think about my foundation, that which is touching the earth. So I'm going to spread my palms as wide as I can and place them underneath the shoulders. So wrists underneath the shoulders. I'm going to check with my legs, knees directly under hips, and checking in with my foundation, I will therefore, and I can't do it, but she really plays with the word press. She goes like, press the tops of my thighs into the earth. So rather than just hanging out on all fours, I'm already considering my foundation, and not just that, but pressing up and out of it, finding what we call tabletop position. So that was Adriene. The last one that I'm going to read to you, Megan Curry. She's an Instagram phenomenon. I think she lives in Bali. She's always in warm places and often in a bikini. She's a super capable yogi, very beautiful woman. And I think she's pretty creative in her cueing, and very very unique to Megan. So I'll read her cue. Spread your fingers really wide. As you spread your fingers, spread them from the roots of the fingers so the whole surface area of your palms grow or stretches like canvas. Grow the tips of your fingers long so it's like you can actually see your fingers growing. Squish all four corners of both hands down into the mat and claw the mat with all your finger pads, like you're pulling your finger pads towards the center of each palm. Micro bend your elbows. Hug your forearms towards the midline. Then we're going to start with a real slow, slow, slow undulation through the spine. As you inhale, begin to tilt your sit bones towards the sky and feel your lower back contract. Let the contraction glide up through the middle back into the back of the heart, so the front of the heart melts down and forward. Let the contraction glide all the way up to the back of your throat, so the front of your throat opens, and then at the very end of that inhale, elongate even more by pulling your hands and knees towards one another. As you exhale, swallow up through the pelvic floor. Draw your pubic bone towards your navel center. Squeeze your navel center in and up towards your solar plexus. Hug your solar plexus in and up towards your heart. Suction your heart in and up towards your throat. Close the front of your throat so the back of your throat opens. Stay here for a moment, and you may have taken more than one breath. That's totally cool. So those are three very different but sort of intertwining ways of cueing, setting up, or moving in cat-cow. Play with your cueing a lot. Yeah, and know that it will shift and change as you practice and learn more. Can I ask who you admire in terms of teaching? That's changed a lot over the years. And people you probably don't even know anymore. I used to love Eric Schiffman. He was a really big influence for me. For a while, I really loved Shiva Ray. I loved her creative flows. I like Mark Whittle a lot. I have a teacher. Her name is Swan, so of course I admire her. And I also have I have a real honest admiration for the Your Yoga Flow teachers. I think they're all very gifted in their own unique way. Actually, one more person I want to give a shout out to for my own, who I learned from, is Amy Matthews. I really like her approach to yoga and movement. She taught me a lot about more somatic cueing and experiential cueing. Yeah, fitness cueing would be very different, but you would also really, Shara, that would really help you as a teacher, because you have that I can't think of the word. You have that more than a platform. You have those basic skills that you can grow from, expand upon. I teach high energy classes, so it's hard to tone down. Now, I didn't talk about that so much, Aveen, that it depends on the intention of your class. This is actually more sort of about how I teach. So if you're teaching high energy classes, it's a different intention than perhaps creating an experiential container for your students. So nice to be with you here.